Okay, in the previous video we showed you how to do your add-ins during the stretch and folds. This time we are going to do it at the shaping stage. So I'm adding a clear cloth insert to my banneton, and then I'm adding a bunch of white rice flour to it. And this is prepping it so that my dough isn't going to stick on the inside. I have my inclusions all chopped up and ready to go, and here's my dough. It's been fermenting overnight on the counter, and it's finished, and we are ready to add our inclusions. I'm using a bowl scraper to get this very sticky dough out of my bowl onto a floured work surface. And I kind of like using my great big wood cutting board for this kind of thing, because with this really sticky dough, it's white, so are my countertops, and it's really hard to see where the dough is stuck. So it's just a personal preference for me, just being able to see it better. And if it's sticking, add a little bit more flour underneath. And what we're going to do now is we are going to push and pull and gently stretch our dough out into a rectangle so that we can add our inclusions. Okay, so I'm just gently pushing and pulling on the dough. We spent all night trying to get it to build up. Now we're flattening it back down again. No worries, it'll come back in the fridge overnight. But be gentle with it. Okay, so we're getting it to about, 16 by 20, 18 by 24, that kind of. And we're going to start by adding our fresh dill, and you want to cover the entire surface, put a nice even amount on. Then you want to add your cubed cheese, and again, nice and even. And then we're going to add a good mix of our diced dill pickles. And these are my homemade ones. When I do my dill pickles again this summer, I will videotape it and put the recipe up on the blog for you. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in threes. So we're starting with the first edge. We're folding it over, and again, we're going to add our inclusions. We're going to cover as much of this as possible. Just remember, the more you can get in here, the better it's going to taste. So cram it in there as tight as you can. Press it down so it doesn't fall out while you're doing the folding and the shaping process. Adding some more dill pickles. I already got the cheese on there. And now we're going to take that second side, and I'm just pushing down to get all the stuff there to stay in place, folding it back over. So I've got my thirds now, and we're going to add another layer of the inclusions here. Okay. Again, as much as you can, evenly distributed. Push it in so it doesn't fall out. And I'm going to have a bunch of cheese left over, and I'll show you why when we get to the baking part. Adding the dill pickles. You guys, this makes the best grilled cheese and pickle sandwiches. You have to try it with this bread. It is amazing. I'll try and remember to do a video the next time I make some. Okay, so we're going to get all of that out of the way. We're going to turn this little guy, because now we've got to roll this up. So I found it a little bit easier to kind of move it into thirds instead of trying to roll it. So that's the first part. Then I'm going to turn it over so that that seam is on the bottom. And we are going to work, first of all, I'm going to clean off what is left sticking on my work surface, because we need to build some tension in this bread. So there needs to be a clean surface to be able to pull it taut. As I'm turning it, I am pushing the sides down. This is the start of adding tension to the bread. And I also want the edges where you can see all the dough to be at the bottom of the dough ball. So by pulling and adding the tension, it's also pushing those sides down to the bottom. Okay, and I'm also holding on to it and pushing it under, and working from all the sides and trying not to blow holes in it. You may get some where you get your dill pickle or your cheese is going to poke through and it's going to tear your dough. It's hard to get around that. It does happen sometimes, but if you're really gentle, it's kind of minimal. Okay, so I'm getting this pretty close to the way I like it. I'm just trying to get a little bit more tension going. And this dough is very sticky. You can see it's still sticking to my hands, but I'm trying really hard not to add any more flour. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to flip it upside down into the banneton, and then we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap. I'm going to put it inside a plastic bag, and it's going to further ferment in my fridge overnight for another 12 hours. Adding this step will help to add the extra sourness to the bread. Okay, so there it is. We did a pretty good job of getting all those rolly edges underneath and getting everything sealed up. Off it goes to the fridge. And it's the next morning. Now we get to bake our bread. So we're pulling it out of the bag, and we're going to save that bag for storing it later. And then remove the plastic cover. Okay, I use these over again too because I have some more bread to make today. So I'm just going to set those aside. And then I have a piece of parchment paper, and we are going to put it over top of our bread, and we're going to flip it out. And I'm just checking to see how sticky it is. It's not really very sticky. If it was super sticky, I'd add some rice flour. Okay, so flipping it out and then removing the banneton. And you're going to have little clumps of the rice flour all over your bread. And you can just use your hand and even that out if you like. I'm just checking to see how many of my dill pickles have poked through. Not too many, one down the side. Okay, I'm getting my razor blade out, and we're going to do some scoring. I'm going to start with some decorative scoring and just a little wheat design down this one side. So just cutting lightly back and forth, and then adding a little bit of a stem down the center of it. And you want to stay shallow on those. Then I'm turning the bread the other way so that I can do a really deep expansion score down this side. You want to get that razor blade in there at least a half an inch and give it a really, really good score. I go over it a couple of times just to make sure that it's good and deep. Because your bread's going to expand. This is your chance to tell it where you want it to. So during the last 5 minutes of your bake, you want to pull your bread out of the oven, and the rest of your inclusions can be added at this time. And I like to pile as much as I can on top, especially the cheese, and then put it back in and let it finish its bake. And when it comes out, it's all melty and juicy and has cheese dripping all over it. I've also added some of the fresh dill and a little bit of dill pickle in there as well. So wedge as much of that in there as you can. Usually the score line is a great place to do that because it's opened up and there's a bit of a ridge on either side, and it will kind of hold everything in place for you. We seriously like cheese in this house, just in case you haven't noticed. Check out my bagel recipe. You'll see just how much cheese we like. It's finished baking. It's time for the reveal. Okay, so I am gently going to grab the paper and hopefully get this thing out of my very, very hot Dutch oven. Place it on a cooling rack, and you want to pull that paper out from underneath too so that the underside gets to cool. And now we've reached the hardest part of sourdough baking. You want to leave this alone and not cut into it for about 2 hours so that you don't make it all gummy. And I know that's going to be really hard to do. But check out all that gooey goodness on the top of this loaf. It's just beautiful. Okay, thanks so much for watching. And here's another video I thought you might like.